we'll go ahead and have open this up for a panel discussion and a dialogue. So if you have any comments, questions, please feel free to speak up, and we'll have a microphone going around. Please use that so that people online can also hear. Yes, in the back.
Yes.
And please also introduce yourself as well.
Elizabeth English, University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. I have a question for Tanya. You spoke about, is it called the Fortified Homes program? It's my understanding that that applies to wind and perhaps also to hail. Is there any, but it does not apply to flood at this point, is that correct? Is there any plan to expand that to include flood?
At the time being, it's not within our scope. I think our next peril that we'll probably focus on is wildfire. Right now there are no plans to address flood. The one piece that is included in regards to flood is in our bigger program, which is called Fortified for Safer Living, and it requires that you build a certain level above the base flood elevation, but other than that, we don't really address flood within our fortified programs.
Anyone else? Yes, this gentleman.
John Wiener, Colorado. Is the safe room standard useful for fire safety in that wildland urban interface, in these rural, slow access, hard escape areas? Or could it be?
I know that Australia has tried to look at that. I don't know too much about what they found, but they have been investigating the use of a very similar construction to the storm shelter for bushland fires. I don't know if anybody else knows.
No, I don't. I don't know. That's fantastic. I'm looking at Annie too. I'm just curious. Have you seen anything?
That's an interesting question. I don't have a mic. Sorry. I don't want to really speak too heavily on it because my answer is I don't know. But we also are very susceptible to wildfires in Oklahoma, and none of our local emergency managers have posed that question to us, and we do have a number of safe rooms. So.
And I think the issue is, or at least from my perspective, because when we see these implemented, it's usually done through a grant, and it's always addressing that one hazard. You know, it's a high wind hazard, so it's not looking at fire as well. But it's an excellent point. You know, maybe it should.
Hi, I'm Arlene Burns. I'm actually a mayor in Oregon, and I'm helping film, obviously. I was wondering on these individual safe rooms, why they aren't in a more aerodynamic shape like a dome where there wasn't a surface to capture trees or debris. It seems like it could be a lot stronger, perhaps with even less material, if the shape of the individual rooms, maybe it's because of a less internal space.
There actually are some that are shaped, they look almost like a spaceship or something. They're like a rounded cone, you know, they're a little smaller. So there are some of those individual safe rooms that are a different design than just the standard above ground box design that you see too. But that's a good point.
Yeah. Yes, I've worked Arkansas, and they have a lot of the aerodynamic ones.
I like to call them the spaceships.
Yes. So can we get in touch with something like the Emergency Management Office in the state? Well, I have one question. After Moore, from what Kevin was saying, has any other community in Oklahoma, it sounds like the code change in Moore could apply to a lot of areas in Oklahoma. Has any other city, even or county, thought about changing their codes to reflect?
Do you have any answer on that?
Oh, yeah. Tom? She wants to answer.
I'll answer the best way I know how to answer that question is, as of today, I believe that Moore is the only community in Oklahoma that has that level of a building code. I know that our code commission has, I believe we've adopted IBC 2015, so with the new requirement for safe rooms in critical facilities, including schools, and new construction applies. But again, it's a local issue, and so we're still working towards that goal in many communities.
Can I have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any suggestion? I work in Arkansas, Louisiana, some really sophisticated areas in those states. I don't work in New Orleans. I work in very, very rural areas. And a lot of, no building codes, nothing. You know, they might defer to, oh, yeah, the state code. I'm not so sure how much that takes effect. Do you have any suggestions of, well, we aren't going to implement a building code. Is there a special code that they would implement?
Well, you're asking an economist. You know, there's a number of things that have been rather encouraging. For one, there is evidence that there's market valuation of better construction and market valuation of mitigation. Aaron was talking about a study south of Austin. We actually did a market-based study on the value, what happens to the real estate value if you have a safe room or you don't. And we did it in central Oklahoma, and we found that there was a 5% premium for homes that sold that had a safe room that didn't. I've also done studies along the coast where one of the elements that we were measuring was what's called a structural integrity index. The predecessor organization, IBHS, was called IPLR, and IPLR had a process that they called the Structural Integrity Index. And we had a civil engineer go through, and from the MLS database, as much as we could, we imputed the value that this home would have had from this Structural Integrity Index, and found that it increased the value of the home. So I think that if you live in a hazardous area, there is indication that the market will value mitigation. Now, if you are in an area that very rarely gets any type of natural hazards, I don't think you would see that. But in our case, we were looking along the coast. It was Galveston Island is where we did the MLS study, and then central Oklahoma. So obviously there is something that people are concerned about, and it is showing up in the value. Now, how do you get the attention of people out in very rural areas to do some of these things? That's a really good question, because I think one of the reasons that people move into more rural areas is to get away from people telling them what to do. And so there's a certain cultural aspect of that to overcome. If you had the political will within the state, you could do what Florida did and implement a statewide building code. Now, you said that, you know, it hasn't happened in Oklahoma. My son lives in Oklahoma City. We live just south of the Oklahoma border. I lived there for 4 years. I don't think you're going to see a statewide building code in Oklahoma. I sent my op-ed from the New York Times to one of the state representatives of Moore, and just to let him know we were doing this. I didn't get a response. So I don't know if I hit a nerve, I wasn't supposed to be talking about this, or what. So there's a lot of culture that comes into these things that is hard to overcome. But the positive thing that the economists can say is that once people become aware, and once they are sufficiently concerned, there is indication that the market will place a value on mitigation.
Well, that's probably an excellent way of handling it in these places. It's an educational process.
Right.
And people see dollars. They
Right.
understand dollars. Elected officials understand dollars. And that's a great way to sell it, even if they have no code. I'm going to protect myself.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And that's a great way to end the session. I'm sorry, we are right up at time. I would love to continue this discussion well into the wee hours of tomorrow, but I'm sure you guys have better things you'd like to do.
Like the wrap-up in Centennial E that's going on now.
Yes.